just to get started, my name's Kevin Kuther. I'm the safety manager for LTAC, which, if you don't know, stands for the Local Highway Technical Assistance Council. We represent the 288 local highway jurisdictions in the state of Idaho. You know, the behemoth being ACHD, and then we have many, many smaller, much smaller ones with a half a staff. So it's kind of a hybrid presentation today. So we're going to talk first part about an RSA process that might help you identify some projects, and then kind of bridge that into how to fund those projects. So the first is the value of conducting a road safety audit. So what is a road safety audit? It's a formal safety performance examination of an existing road. It can be a future road, but really the existing ones, let's start there, or an intersection, by an independent audit team. So the formal part of it means that it's based on a set of procedures. FHWA's got a good guideline for those things. It's safety focused. So when you're identifying things, ideas or improvements might come up that would be capacity related. Those aren't poo-pooed, for lack of a better term, but the importance of this is the safety aspect of these ideas. Independent is important also. You want people who are not directly related to the funding or are not as familiar with the area. So we've had success with neighboring jurisdictions providing members. We want the biking community to be there, emergency services, FedEx drivers, school bus drivers, mail carriers, people who see these things every day to be a part of the team. You want fresh eyes, right? So you don't necessarily want the city engineer or the public works directors or those people involved in this project. As a matter of fact, we'd prefer they're not. So a little background, the goal of the RSA is to consider the safety of all the road users. Like, so the purpose of this summit, the bikes, pedestrians, those areas are considered, or those users are considered when you're looking at intersections, like if we use those as examples. So if the biking community is not present in the RSA, sometimes dueling ideals might become an issue. So something that comes up a lot is rumble strips. Well, rumble strips aren't the most popular word with this group of people, I'm assuming, but if they're not represented, then sometimes that's the path that gets chosen, or the projects that go forward. So the goal of these things is to have as many people involved with interest in the area or the project. So the aim is to answer those two questions. The what presents the safety concern and how to mitigate it is what that kind of all boils down to. Like I said, it's a team of people that go out. I like to say it's kind of like magic cookie land. You get to say, without respect to a budget or how much it's going to cost, you get to say what you'd like to see. And then these are formally presented to a governing council of that jurisdiction, and both orally, and then it gets put in a report, and then they're forced to respond to each of those things. The response might be, we're not going to do anything, but they have to respond. So celebrate your successes, I guess, a little. I'm going to let Amanda talk a little bit about it more, but we did a road safety audit of the intersection of Bottle Bay and US 95 up north. It was the whole corridor of Bottle Bay Road, but the one thing that came up at this intersection was the separation of, there's a path that goes through there, and I'm not from there. Ryan, you might help me out. I don't know what the name of that path is. The Sego path, okay. So when we were sitting there and you examine some of the data and the safety concerns was, there's pedestrians and bikes that cross that road, and you looked at the geography of the land, and it comes up like, why don't we put a tunnel under this road for those people? And lo and behold, that, again, you prioritize this by what's possible, low-hanging fruit versus that's gonna take some planning. But this one was put in that it's gonna take some planning and it's 10 years out. The safety program then had some funding. This project was identified and it is now designed and it will be constructed this summer, the pedestrian path under that road. That's a really compressed, and Ryan can probably speak to that. It's really compressed presentation on road safety audits and what they're for. So if you guys have questions on that, let's probably go right now with those. Do you have any of those?
So you were saying that you needed to reach out to an independent a group of people to do this audit. So do you give recommendations? I mean, is it just within the community, more or less? Like you said, you know, like transit.
Yeah, so the funding mechanism that funds the road safety audit would be to basically, if it's me in the safety program, it would be to fund the design consultant to coordinate the effort. We will make the recommendations, but there's not any stipulations for hotel rooms and those kinds. So the idea is that get somebody local that can be there, because it's a 2-day high-intensive process typically. So you want to go early in the morning, drive the corridor, walk the corridor, whatever it is, see those problems firsthand, then get as a group together, discuss those and what might be in order to categorize everything you're seeing, then go back out at night, see if there's something that a safety issue that presents itself at night versus in daylight hours. So in the summertime when that's happening, you know, that's a large span of time that you're having people out there. So ideally, if you can get somebody from the local area that can drive home, their normal employer pays their salary, the audit does not. So that's why it's hard to get all these people together, but you need to have that common interest, that common goal to get together and get these projects identified or the safety concerns addressed. So, Chris.
What qualifies for road safety audit? What does that take to
So if you're using the safety program, which we'll talk about next, it has to have a qualifying crash. So it has to have the corridor you're interested in, the intersection you're interested in, whatever it is, would have to have a fatal or serious injury crash. We have had success, though, if a local would come forward and express interest in doing a road safety audit. ITD will participate, FHWA will participate, LTAC would sometimes we will always participate when asked, but we can come up and coordinate, we just can't get a consultant on board. We wouldn't have a mechanism to fund a consultant, but we've also had success with consultants providing those services too, because it does identify projects.
So there has to be a debt. There has to be a base.
No, so that would be to fund it through the LSIP program. If you had an area of concern and wanted to perform an audit outside of that funding mechanism, LTAC would help you. You don't have to have that. If there's area of concern where you have a lot of crashes happening or a lot of incidents and you would like to have this team together, give me a call. We can talk about other ways to make it happen. It's just, there's not gonna be that funding behind it.
It doesn't need a fatality, right?
Nope. Yep. For the safety program, it's fatal or serious injury crash, type A. But again, those are two pots there's a pot of money, and then there's a level of support or help that we would provide.
So if we see a very troublesome area, an area of major concern, and we call you, you would help us to figure out
How to
some
coordinate
kind of
that, yep.
plan or something to do to remedy that outside of that.
Yeah,
funding.
outside of a funding.
Get that funding unless there had been
Correct.
an incident there.
Correct.
So basically, it would be like a RSA light. We could do something that doesn't require hiring a consultant and going through the whole formal process, having it FHWA approved, have it written everything. You know, that's where you have to have a qualifying crash and you can apply for funding to get it paid for. But if you have a situation in your town, say you don't have a lot of crashes, but it's still a concern to the people that live there, still reach out to us and we'll help you guide, you know, who you should have there. It doesn't have to be 2 days, it could be an afternoon. And you can still get some really good recommendations and feedback for projects you can apply for with a light version versus the formal RSA.
Got it.
The difference being to that statement is if you go through a process of calling something a road safety audit, it has to follow that formal process, follow those steps, responses from your governing body has to be in writing. So just, there's been a, if you're gonna call it an RSA, it has to follow the process, I guess. That's as far as we'll go down that rabbit hole. Yep. There's been some questions about that term that Amanda used, RSA light. There's been some problems with that term, but.
Okay.
So I guess, is that in the end of those questions? My meter is now expired. That is what's going on with my phone. So the next thing I'd like to talk about is the safety program. That's a program that I'm pretty proud of. We do a lot of pretty cool projects specifically related to safety. So I'm just gonna give you the Cliff's Notes version, which Millennial, that's a book that came out that used to summarize an entire book. So the program is to eliminate fatal and serious injury crashes. Annually, we have $8.5 million available. So that says FY20. The FY20 applications are all received, so the next round will be FY21. What that means is that's the intended year of construction, but because the program needs some little flexibility to go here or there, we ask that you let us put those projects within a 3-year window or something, and I'd let you know what those are. We currently have the FY20 list of eligible jurisdictions on our website. Last year of the 288, there was 156 of those jurisdictions qualified for this funding. Again, that ITD will update their crash data, send it to us typically around July, but that's been fluctuating a little. So we will have 2017 data in July available on our website. Just to give you a little insight of what that looks like, if you would go to our website under the LSIP or the resources tab, you can come up with the crash map. When you pull it up, if you would select any of those ITD districts, it'll then pare it down. And you get a crash filter. So in this case, I chose pedestrian and pedal cycles. And I pared it down and I zoomed in yesterday when I was doing this to Star, Idaho. And those are the 2 pedestrian crashes that Star, Idaho had in the last 5 years. And then you can highlight those crashes and it'll come up with some details below. So if you wanted to RSA light from your computer, you could look at what's happening and try to identify projects that way, or an area of concern for lack of a better term. Then we could talk about an RSA maybe to address those or identify some projects that could mitigate that. FHWA has a clearinghouse for crash modification factors. So the safety program is data-driven. We don't have like a description paragraph where somebody scores it and rates everybody's applications and sees a need, or the only thing that those projects are selected on is purely a cost-benefit ratio. So you have to have a crash modification factor to make that cost-benefit ratio math work, you know, the behind the scenes, how the sausage is made, the Wizard of Oz, whatever you want to know is behind there. But that's what's happening. So it's basically the cost of installing versus the cost of not installing. And that's where that comes up with. And it's like I said, it's a line of demarcation every year. Here's the funding and there's what we can fund, anything above that line. So if you're looking for, again, possible ideas, it's a good place to start. You can start with where the crashes are happening and then possible improvements right there on using that. We have some of the resources on our website would be some workbooks. There is a pedestrian one, there's an intersection one, there's roadway departures. For the purpose of this, you know, the pedestrian one would be what you guys are after. if you have questions about how the program works or anything, like, feel free to call me. I'll be up here and you can grab a card from me or something at the end of this. Our next application will be due, it's around the middle of January. It's usually the third Thursday, but that's kind of a moving target too. But it'll always be mid-January. We will have workshops that we go throughout the state, probably in October, where we will discuss the funding, and by then we will know who's eligible, what jurisdictions are eligible for the safety program. There'll be a TAP portion, there'll be hopefully child ped safety, there'll be all of the programs that LTAC represents will be discussed. So again, if you want to be on that mailing list, take a card, call me, whatever, we'll get you on those lists. So any questions on that one? I am now going to turn it over to Amanda and Ken.
Yeah, not so tall. Got to move this down.
Sorry.
Yeah. All right, so child pedestrian safety. So this is the program that Cynthia was talking about this morning in her keynote at the beginning, where we got the $2 million, barely by the skin of our teeth out of the $250 million available to fund children pedestrian safety program. And who doesn't want to improve safety for children pedestrians? That's such a bipartisan idea. Everyone wants to make it safer for our kids to get to school. Little background on it. I know we got a little bit of a history this morning, but it's jointly funded. So of the $2 million that we got, about 60% of it is supposed to go toward ITD, state route projects, and 40% is allocated toward local projects. The way that it worked this past round is we just evaluated all the projects, and each project got a score. And luckily, ITD was really great to work with, and we just funded the best projects from the top down. So it was more like a 50-50 ITD and local split rather than a 60-40. So they were really great. The money comes from surplus eliminator, and a big caveat to that is the surplus eliminator funding is a maintenance umbrella. So we really try to approach all of the projects have to incorporate some kind of maintenance. It can't be building a brand new trail, connecting something that didn't have an existing connection before. We're really trying to find those gaps in the system. Where do we have sidewalk on one side, sidewalk on another side, and then for 2 blocks, kids have to walk in the street. So those are the type of maintenance projects that we're looking for in this program funding. We had $2 million, and we were really trying to highlight this year projects that were very safe bets, projects that we knew if we gave you the money, you could build it, and we could go back to the legislature this year and say, we spent all of our $2 million, we had 100% success, and these are the projects that we completed in your area so that we could build some of that connection to the funding and maybe try and get more in the following years. And I talked about it being maintenance. If you want more information, this is a link to our website. It's pretty easy to get to from the main page, and it has all of the projects that we funded last year and the rankings. And then something that I didn't put in here is we had 79 applications, and we funded 12. So, the state gave us $2 million. Well, we could have spent 15 or 20 easily and still had really good projects to build. So obviously there's a big interest in this area, and we'd love to try and have 100% success and convince the legislature to give us more. So the basic structure, we don't know if we're going to have another round of child ped safety. We're waiting until July to see if we have a surplus in the budget again. If there is a surplus, we will still move forward with applications, and those applications will be due in October. We still have to wait on legislative action, though. So even if we go out for the application and we make our recommendations, we still have to go to the legislature and say, here's our recommendations, you need to vote and approve this funding to be spent for children pedestrians. So just want to throw that out there. Assuming they do approve it, we would be able to notify you of your award in January, and then you have until November to spend the money. And this is a great program because it's state funds, so you don't have to pay Davis-Bacon. It's, we write you a check right away in January, so you have the money up front. You don't have to front it. You don't have a match. So I encourage all of you to look at this program as a really great opportunity, and between now and October, reach out to me or anyone at LTAC to see what types of projects would be best suited for this program to give you the best chance of getting funds. And what's really neat about it is it's scored by the same folks that score the TAP program. So they're already really familiar with what types of projects and are going on in the state and really familiar with the different local jurisdictions so that we have a connection to these projects. Basic funding, up to $250,000. It's a little bit of strategy, whether do you ask for the full amount and hope you get it all, or do you put in a project that is only $50,000 and hope that if there's a hole at the end, you can sneak in because you're a lower cost project. And I will say we funded 5 extra projects at the end that were $20,000 or less because we funded all the way down through up to the $2 million, and we couldn't fund the next whole project. So we kept going down the list until we could fit a whole project. And so there were 4 or 5 communities that applied for an RRFB, and it was just the materials order only. So that was $15,000, or they wanted signage or something like that. So there's a little bit of strategy. Do you ask for the whole cow or do you ask for the filet mignon? So you really want to decide what's the highest priority in your community, because you can only apply for one project. So we had 79 different jurisdictions apply for one project. This funding is only allowed to be spent on the contractor. So you can't, for example, if the city of Boise applied, the city couldn't pay their own staff to work on the project. It can only pay a contractor to do the work or order materials. If you want to leverage your funds, if you have a city that has staff that can do construction work, you can put that into your request and say, the total project cost is $250,000, but I'm only asking for $200, and basically it's a gift, saying we're gonna do the equivalent of $50,000 worth of our own staff doing work. You just aren't eligible to be refunded by that. But it does show that you're putting in your own money, your own staff, and gives it a little bit more emphasis that it's a high priority in your jurisdiction. So example projects, I would say I added at the bottom, almost all of the projects that were funded last year were at or near a school, because the first question on the application says, how does this project improve children pedestrian safety? And if your project only, if it improves pedestrian safety for all users, that's awesome. But this program is really geared toward children. So how can you show that most of the users of this roadway are kids? And so the easiest way to do that is to have it near a school. Say this is a common route, a safe routes to school, to get people from their residential area to the school locations. So that's just a caveat for the next round that will really help your application. So it has to be maintenance because it's in that strategic initiatives surplus eliminator umbrella. That's all maintenance. So try to say, it's a gap in the system or replacing current sidewalk that's not ADA compliant or something like that. ADA ramps are a good idea. Pedestrian crossings like RRFBs. If you have a crash or fatalities with kids crossing the road, that is, a really good fit for this funding program that has a higher chance of getting funded because they looked at safety, mobility, and how does it affect children. If you have any questions about this program, especially since we expect there to be a surplus and we expect this program to be around the following year, reach out to me before October. Ask me if this is a good project. I reviewed all 79 applications last year and helped work with ITD on that. So I have a really good idea of, what's a good fit and what's not a good fit. So if you're trying to pick between 2 projects or how can I make my application better, the safety question asks for hard data. And if you don't have hard data, like crashes on our website, there are ways around that. Can you stand someone on next to your school and count the number of kids that walk to school, and just have some kind of hard data to get you their scores higher, because it's a highly competitive process with only 12 or 14 projects getting funded out of 79. So I encourage you to reach out to me. I'm happy to sit down with you or over the phone, talk through some of those ideas. And next is Ken talking about the TAP program.
We're going to take questions together.
Oh, sure, we'll take questions.
Okay. So, before I introduce myself, Amanda just had mentioned that she reviewed those 79 applications, but she failed to mention that she also reviewed 43 TAP applications and was reviewing over 120 of these bicycle and pedestrian applications in the last year, which is a lot to take on, especially when we had simultaneous review time for both of those. So I'm going to be talking about our federal program that ITD manages. First, so this past year, I served as the interim program manager as the person that was the previous program manager took a different role on at ITD, and we took a while to hire on someone. Ryan McDaniel, our current TAP program manager, is out actually attending other sessions so he can build his skills in the bicycle and pedestrian realm as well. So there are other eligibilities other than bicycle and pedestrian projects in TAP. I don't think Idaho's gotten any of them yet, but there's vegetation control and some other ones, and no one seems to be interested in putting those in there. So it just by default turns into a bicycle and pedestrian funding program. Local governments, transportation agencies, school districts, nonprofits. That nonprofit is only eligible for our non-infrastructure grants, not for infrastructure grants. However, they can partner with other agencies, and then any other agency could be like a park authority over any type of transportation oversight. Projects off the state highway system after award are managed by LTAC. Projects on the state highway system are managed by ITD. There's some information in the presentation on who the contacts are. However, the best thing to always do is to go to ITD's website to find out who your local TAP program coordinator is, because those people change and that can happen at any time. So as ITD's goals are, our mission is your safety, your mobility, your economic opportunity. These applications are scored in that manner. We do focus mostly on safety and mobility, but there is an economic opportunity component. We do like to see that these applications, that there's a component of working with your community. Anything that you can do to demonstrate that only benefits the applications. And the purchase of right-of-way is not eligible, and that's a state policy. So we have, well, that really doesn't come up on the screen. This was a slide we had from our webinar distinguishing the two programs. And you know, go to LTAC's website to get this, because it'll come up crystal clear, and we're not even going to bother with it here. So then we'll take joint questions on the two funding programs. And also in regards to TAP, as of right now, there's no federal funding legislation or authorization past 2020. So if you were in the presentation two prior to this, where they're telling, hey, call your state legislature or this, for TAP, you have to call your federal representation. So whether that's our state senators or the congressman that represents you, that's who you need to call to advocate for TAP funding. So.
Clarification, you said that you cannot pay for right-of-way, but when you put your application in, doesn't the right-of-way have to be cleared at that time too, or am I not?
Not 100% cleared. So for example, if you're getting some type of transportation easement through rail line or other, or any agreement can be pending based on the award. So if a local jurisdiction is working with another partner agency or private citizens, and they have it in place where that easement or right-of-way would be finalized upon award, we'll accept that as well.
I will say though, in the application, the points that are allocated for right-of-way, it's out of 10 points on the previous application. If you don't have all that right-of-way, you're not gonna get full score on that. You know, there's gonna be some risk, and that might be the difference between a project that gets funded and a project that doesn't, because, you know, just like Child Ped, there was we only funded half the TAP projects that were applied for. So really try to pick projects that fit the category. You know, if it says you need to have right-of-way, pick a project that has the right-of-way already. You know, it's worth, you know, even if it's your second high priority in your city, you know, in number one, you don't have the right-of-way, number two priority, you do, just because it might be the difference between getting funding or not.
Because historically, in southwest Idaho, we've had one, I don't know whether it was interstate routes or TAP, that the city was the awardee, but in the end, they had to refund all the money because they did not close their right-of-way. They anticipated it being a short manner, and I don't even think, it took maybe 7 years.
So as an example, on the application, we don't just take people's word for it. When they're attaching attachments to the application, we do ask for those types of right-of-way commitments in writing, and preferably signed by the authorized representative that you're working with for that. Any other questions?
Done early.
Thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you.